Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson. We've got a great show for you this week. Our guest is Isabel Cañas, the author of books like The Hacienda and Vampires of El Norte. We are going to talk to Isabel about her new novel, The Possession of Alba Diaz, and we are going to dig into one of the best horror movies of the 2000s, one of the best haunted house films of all time, The Others. It's a great time. Hope you enjoy it as much as I did. But first, I also wanted to throw a book recommendation y'all's way. September is going to be a super busy time for horror publishing, as you might expect, as the lead into Halloween. There's going to be a lot of great stuff by a lot of great authors. One book that I can absolutely tell you to go pre-order right now, because I just finished reading it, is Play Nice, the new one from Rachel Harrison. It's a very cool book. It is Rachel doing a haunted / possessed house, complete with family issues and trauma and memories and how our memories lie to us and all of that good stuff wrapped up in that amazing Rachel Harrison voice that we all love. Go pre-order it. There's a chance, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that we will be talking about it on this very show in the coming weeks. So I wanted to put that on everyone's radar. But that is enough of me rambling right now. We are going to go talk to Isabel Cañas. So let's head over to our amazing interview right now. Joining us this week on The Scares That Shaped Us is one of the most impressive rising star horror novelists working right now. She is the best-selling author of books like The Hacienda and Vampires of El Norte. Her latest novel, The Possession of Alba Diaz, is in stores August 19th. Isabel Cañas, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me and for that glowing introduction.
Oh, it's my pleasure. As I said before we started recording, I've been a fan since The Hacienda. The Hacienda, when it came out, was one of those like, oh, you have to read this year. Like, don't make your end of year list until you've read The Hacienda. And I read it and was immediately just taken with the way that you are able to blend history and horror. And I love that has become a recurring thing for you. Like we get different corners of history and different corners of Central America in your voice, and that continues with The Possession of Alba Diaz. So for our listeners who may not know, could you give us a little taste of what the new novel is?
Absolutely. So the possession of Alba Diaz is what it says on the tin. It's about Alba Diaz and how she gets possessed by a demon. The possession of Alba Diaz takes place in the 18th century in the city of Zacatecas in north central Mexico. It was the silver mining capital of Mexico in the Spanish colonial period. And so it's the center of the Spanish silver mining enterprise in Mexico. And so Alba is the daughter of a wealthy merchant, and she and her fiance Carlos flee the city to Carlos's estate in the mountain, mining home in the mountains when plague strikes the city in 1765. They reach this house in the mountains. It is exceptionally creepy. And guess what? There's also a very creepy silver mine that may or may not be haunted. Alba starts to experience sleepwalking episodes, strange nightmares, hearing disembodied voices, especially in and around the mine. And looking for help, she turns to the one person who she really shouldn't get involved with, and that is Carlos's cousin Elias, who has come to the New World from Spain to help dig his family out of debt and get rich quick in the process. And yearning ensues, forbidden love ensues, and also a whole lot of spooky shit. And the
Yes.
Spanish Inquisition, which nobody expects.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. It is a wonderful new exploration of a subgenre for you, but I feel like it's also a very good, the yearning that you mentioned makes it a very good companion piece to the Hacienda. If you like that kind of gothic storytelling, you will like The Possession of Alba Diaz. Plus, you get demons. So we have three novels from you, all set in different little pockets of history
Mhm.
around Mexico. And so I have to ask, what comes first for you? Is it the horror idea or is it the historical period and place?
That's a fantastic question. For me, it's usually the horror trope that I want to explore. When I came up with the idea for the Hacienda, I knew I wanted to write a haunted house book. That was, and which is, perfect to talk about on this particular podcast because of the film that I wanted us to discuss today. But that was the trope that I wanted to explore. And so I then, based on that trope and the characters who started to like walk in and out of the idea, I found a part of history and a place in Mexico where it made the most sense. For Vampires of El Norte, I knew I wanted to like have a stab at the vampire in a different way. And at the same time, I also knew that one character's backstory was really much the same, really tied to a specific time and a specific place, which is where my family comes from in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas, on the border between what is now Texas and Mexico,
Hmm.
which was not always the border, which is kind of part of the whole pitch in that particular novel. For the Possession of Alba Diaz, I approached it similarly to as I approached the Hacienda. I knew I wanted to have a go at like a haunted underground place. That was where it started. That's where the ideas started to coalesce. Because usually when I come up with a book idea, it is, I've said before, tongue in cheek, but the more I think about it, the truer I realize it is. I start with a constellation of vibes. There's an atmosphere that I'm gunning that I want to lasso and rein in somehow. There are particular archetypes I want to play with. And when it comes to the Gothic, you have a set. There's like a great grab bag of archetypes to play with. The priest, can you trust him? The ingenue, the young bride. Like there's all these fun archetypes to play with. So I usually have pick two or three and start to, play bumper cars with the idea. Does this work? Does that work? And because Silvermine came to mind when I started thinking about demonic possession, I knew that would have to be tied to a particular place in Mexico and a particular time. Zacatecas, as the silver mining capital of Mexico in the colonial period, experienced a boom and bust economy. And so there were many mines like Saltillo around it, which also experienced like atmospheric heights of wealth and crashes. And so I wanted to come at I just found something so gloriously gothic about this juxtaposition of wealth and decay and opulence and rot that is it just the vibe. It's impossible not to be attracted to it if you like to write the sorts of things I like to write. And so I was delving through the history of silver mining in this region, trying to find the right time. So I followed the money and I wanted to find a place where, based on the kind of energy I was getting from the characters, I was like, okay, rich girl. Like that's who we're starting with. So we should probably be in a boom cycle of this particular kind of cyclical economy. So let's find a boom cycle. I wanted it to be further back in time than my other novels, just to I'm a medievalist by training. The 18th century feels positively modern to me because it kind of is, y'all. When you're used to pawing through the 1300s, like this stuff like is incredibly modern, but the 19th century was just far too modern for me. So I wanted to go back, much to my publisher's dismay. But yeah, so to make a very long and winding answer short, the trope I come at the trope first. Because usually there is a particular vibe that an itch I want to scratch. There's something that haunts me that I want to explore. There's something that scares me that I want to explore. Demonic possession for somebody who was raised in an extremely Catholic household, bro, there's nothing scarier. So I came at that and then I started to just follow the money through history and figured out where it led me.
It's so fun for me in particular, your books, because I'm a Texan. I grew up in Texas,
Yeah.
and the thing about when you study history in school in Texas is they teach you Texas history. Like there's a whole
Mm-hmm.
unit that's just this is the history of Texas. And within that unit, because it is devoted to Texas, you basically get the story of like, well, there were these explorers from Spain and they sailed across the Atlantic and they did horrible things to the indigenous people of Central America and took over, and then they were there, and then eventually they were overthrown and it became Mexico, and then Texas came in and we fought the Battle of the Alamo and blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah. So it is this whole Spanish colonial period. What I'm getting at is viewed in a very monolithic way. I think
Mm-hmm.
by so many Americans, like we view it as like, oh, the Spanish were there for a few centuries, and then it became Mexico, and now it's Mexico. And what I love about your books is all of these very fascinating wrinkles within that, and the way that these people functioned, and in this novel in particular, I love the with Alba in particular as a character. She is, like you said, a rich girl. She is a very sort of practical rich girl in the sense that
Mm-hmm.
she knows the life path that she can take that is going to offer her the least resistance while still getting a modicum of what she desires. And I find her very interesting to follow. Um, in crafting her as a character, what did you read? What did you look to? What were your sort of touchstones, whether they're historical or just like other fictional influences that shaped Alba?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't remember which essay it was by J.R.R. Tolkien. It might have been on fairy stories. It might have been an essay he wrote on endings. Um, but he talks about how all writers have what he called, air quotes, a leaf mold. Basically, leaves fall on this big pile and start to just like decompose all together, creating this very rich fertilizer. And that is so the leaves in this analogy are the books that you're reading, the media that you're consuming all start to feed into your leaf mold. And like what pops out at the other end is informed by all that came before. Um, when it came to crafting Alba, I came at her very similar. I think you pointed out that to you, you felt like there was a similarity between the Hacienda and the Possession of Alba Diaz. And I definitely believe that they're sister novels, and Vampires of El Norte is like the awkward middle child.
Hmm.
Because similar, I came at crafting Alba similar to how I came at crafting Beatriz. She's also a young woman who finds herself in a social world that is deeply patriarchal, deeply white supremacist, and she knows that she is adopted and she is of a murky, uncertain background. She doesn't know her parentage, but she knows that she looks different from her very white Criollo parents. And so, in a period of Spanish colonial history where there was a very structured caste system in the Americas, that meant a lot, and it meant a lot to her person. And so I looked at history, but also I've been really deeply informed by the historical novels that I've read over many, many years. And first and foremost, I am a big old fantasy reader. Um, I absolutely loved also the novels of Isabel Allende when I was growing up. Those were huge for me. The House of the Spirits is a homecoming. I read it when I was gosh, I was really sad one summer living in I was living in this tiny little Scottish garret. It was a really wet, rainy summer. I was working my butt off in between years of university and I was really lonely. And I read that book and it felt like coming home. So there are voices and modes of storytelling that have really influenced me over the years. But when it came to Alba in particular, I also drew a lot from myself. I think I'm not a particular, well, especially before I met my husband, who has definitely like mellowed me out over the last like 13 odd years. I My personality is not exactly what you would call warm and fuzzy. Like at my wedding, my mom described me as prickly in a speech in front of everyone, and I was like, "Thanks, mom." I love you too. But it's true. I think at my core, when we craft characters as authors, each one is a particular facet of who we are. It is a piece of our past, it's a piece of our there are pieces of our present that are all woven together. And when it comes to my heroines, I put myself in their shoes and I try and think about how I would act in their situations. So there's a lot of myself in Alba. Is she a bit pragmatic and unromantic? Absolutely. And there's a part of me that is also that. But she also swoons for someone she shouldn't, which is I'm a deeply romantic person as well. So there's a lot of me in Alba. And I think the way she approaches living in a very patriarchal and Catholic society is also something I experienced as well, growing up in a very Catholic, patriarchal kind of household. So honestly, there's a lot of me in her.
Hmm.
So yeah, people often ask me, "Oh, where can you find me online?" I'm like, "You know where you can find me? In this book. That's where I am."
So you've mentioned your Catholic upbringing.
Mhm.
Um, I'm sort of half Catholic. My mother's family was Catholic, but that's German Catholic, so it's a little bit of a different flavor. But
Mhm.
um, I am fascinated by the sort of dividing line in like horror fandom between
Mm.
people who find demonic possession stories and like Christian demonic possession stories. So stories derived from Christian lore. People who find those absolutely scary and addictive and always want to dig into them, and people who are just like, well, I don't believe in God, so that's not scary to me.
Mhm.
And I'm always like, yeah, but you can like imagine something taking over your body that you don't want in there, right? Like that's scary.
That is
So,
the core horror, I think, of possession. It's about lose a loss of autonomy. It's about something else deciding what happens with your body, which I think the reason I was drawn to this particular trope after having back-to-back pregnancies was because I had experienced what it was like to have an alien creature in my body, kind of
well,
determining what was going to happen to my body, which was and my kids are gonna I've talked about this before in a few interviews, and my kids are gonna look back at this and be like, "Wow, mom, you must have loved being pregnant with us so much. You compared us to demonic possession." And I'm like, maybe.
well, there are like wonderful little bits in the novel of as stuff starts to happen to Alba, and you start to think, okay, this is where the possession part of the story is kicking in. You do describe it very much as something inside of her body
Hmm.
physically turning and shifting, and
Hmm.
not just a feeling that she has in her head, but like it's actually physically affecting her. So yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
um how did your I don't know what your relationship to Catholicism is now, but
Mhm.
how did your upbringing and your experience in those traditions inform the way that you, since we know there's so much of Alba in you, how
Yeah.
did that inform the way that you sort of evolved her possession story?
Absolutely. Growing up, the idea of demonic possession, I think those who were also raised in very religious households, uh, regardless of whatever that religion was,
Hmm.
um, can agree that there is this sense that the supernatural is in fact possible, that the battle, and in my particular household, the battle between lightness and darkness was not an abstract thing. It was very real. This battle between good and evil, with angels and awful, terrible entities, um, was a concrete thing that was honestly kind of terrifying. And so one reason that my older sister often says that the reason she thinks that we're drawn to speculative fiction, because all of my siblings and I are, is because we were raised in a speculative reality where things that are to many readers supernatural tropes, air quotes, were not tropes at all, but were things to be very mindful of in the way that you carried out your life. Witchcraft was also extremely a real thing. Like my dad was one of those people who was like anti-Harry Potter because like witchcraft, I mean, could lead you to darkness and to the devil, and then you imperil your immortal soul. So I that absolutely shaped me as a young person. I walked away from Catholicism as fast as I friggin' could, or the particular brand of Catholicism that I grew up around, which is called Opus Dei. It's a product of Franco Spain, and hot damn does it feel like it sometimes. It's just a
Hmm.
little much on the, it's just a little much in terms of like patriarchal structures and what is expected of women and in particular of women's bodies. I think being in a childbearing body, not just historically, but in this particular juncture in history, um, and not just in that religion, but in this country, is a horrifying thing. The question of one's autonomy over their body, if you have a uterus, is really scary, I think, in this particular day and age. And so I was raised in an environment where the expectation for me growing up as a woman was very cut and dry. And I didn't want it. I wanted control over who I was. I wanted control over what I did. And I rebelled, of course. And then I moved away. I moved halfway across the world to go live in Scotland for university. And I like started writing books and found myself writing right back into that. And it's really made me, I think, ah, it's just something I can't get away from when I'm writing. One person, one interviewer asked me, like, is the core story at the heart of all of your books, is it religion? Because of the way you were raised. And I think, and I thought it was a great question, but one thing it brought to mind for me was like, maybe not religion per se, but belief systems.
Yeah.
I find belief systems an obsession that I keep coming back to. Like, what are the beliefs we have about who we should be in the world, first of all, but who we are after the world? And is there any communique between the two? That's something that I revisit and revisit and revisit. I just keep writing. I don't know how to stop it. If I could write about something else, I would love to, but here we are.
Well, that and those particular themes, I think I couldn't have asked for a better transition to the story that you chose today. So we're going to talk about The Others, Alejandro Amenabar's 2001 Gothic haunted house horror film, one of the best haunted house movies of all time, starring Nicole Kidman. I was so excited when you picked this movie because I was like, "Oh, the historical horror novelist wants to talk about historical horror." And so it was very fun watching it through that lens of I've seen it, a few times before, but
Mhm.
going back last night and thinking of it, like reading passages of the Possession of Alba Diaz and then going and watching the others was very interesting. And I should mention up top because this is a movie with a twist.
Mhm.
We are going to spoil this almost 25-year-old film as we talk about it. So
Sacre
if
bleu.
yeah,
Only 25 years old, y'all.
I
Go
write
watch
about
it.
I write about movies on the internet. I have to tell people this beforehand.
Yeah.
So like, but
Disclaimer.
it is streaming
Breaking
on.
news. Old movie gets spoiled.
Yes, old movie gets spoiled. Do you guys want to know the twist in Psycho too? We can talk about that if you guys really need to. But yeah, it's streaming places. It's on, I think AMC Plus has it right now and a few other places. So like if you haven't seen it and you don't want us to spoil it for you, pause the podcast, watch the others, come back.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Off you pop. Come back later.
the others is so cool because it is a movie that you get to watch for the first time twice. Because you watch it for the first time,
Hmm.
if you're lucky enough to watch it without knowing, as I was, because I saw it I guess when it first hit home video in
Same.
shoot. Okay, so I was going to ask, like, what was your? Yeah, let's start there. What was your first encounter with the others like, and what do you remember about it?
So, I was probably 11 or 12 years old. Uh, and I don't know which one of us, me or my older sister, picked it out at the library, but one of us did on VHS. And at the time in my family, we didn't have like a TV that was like connected to, anything. We had like a little 13-inch box that we could pop VHSs into and watch things on, but we couldn't get like actual television channels on it at
Hmm.
all. Um, and we brought this little TV up to our bedroom and plugged it in, and we're like lying on our tummies on the floor with our chins in our hands watching this movie. And I was absolutely shook. I was terrified. It's to give like a brief synopsis of the film. It takes place on the island of Jersey, right after World War II. So like this really misty island. It's very isolated. Nicole Kidman, whose name is Grace in the movie, and her two little kids live in this big manor house. And her kids have this intense photosensitivity disease. And so she has to shut all the curtains in the house to keep them safe from the sun that will like burn them really terribly. And by and by, these three people come by the house and they're like, "Oh, I'm a maid, I'm a housekeeper, I'm a nanny or whatever." And she hires them to like, because there's no staff in the house. And so she has to staff the house because she's like, ye old English rich lady who has a house with staff. And it's this creaky old house that starts to do things that are very unsettling. Like the shades will be ripped open in the morning, and her kids will start screaming because the sun will hurt them. And she has to run around the house, shutting all the shades. There's beautiful use of light in this movie that really triggers your sense of the uncanny. Instruments start playing themselves, voices, disembodied voices happen. Like her husband, this is right after World War II, and her husband died on the front, and he appears at one point in the woods and comes and stays for a bit. So as the movie progresses, like more and the supernatural elements start to build and build and build. And Nicole Kidman believes that the house is haunted. Grace believes the house is haunted. And what is she going to do to fix that? How is she going to protect her children? The twist, don't listen to this if you haven't seen the movie, or maybe do. Pick your poison. The twist is that the voices that Grace is hearing are the voices of people engaged in a seance because she and her children and her staff are dead. They are the spirits who are haunting the house. And so the others of the title are those. First you think it's the supernatural elements that are messing with Grace, but then you realize Grace and her children are the others who are haunting the living. And so your whole concept of the movie flips and it becomes like heartrendingly sad when you discover why um, she and her children are dead, and also the fact that they are dead. It's I remember there is this scene where at the very end where she's hugging her children and explaining to them what happened. And now that I'm a mother, I am choking up thinking about it.
Oh, it's really hard to watch. Yeah.
It is really hard to watch if you have children, so be warned. Um, it's a beautiful film. The end has kind of this uplifting note to it because the living family. So basically, what happened is like, okay, Nicole Kidman and her kids are haunting this house, shutting all the shades, making lots of voices, like screaming, making lots of noises, screaming when the shades are opened. And the family that has moved into this house hires, um, what's the word? Not
A
a paranormal
medium.
investigator. Thank you, a medium
Yeah.
to speak to the spirits and figure out what the heck is going on. Um, Living family learns what the heck is going on and moves out. It's like, fuck this shit. This house is haunted. We're gone. And so they move out at the end of the film, and Nicole Kidman and her kids, and the staff who, surprise, are also dead, watch them go. And the the closing bit is like, well, we're all going to be safe. We're all going to be together because this is our house. You know,
Mm-hmm.
people will move in and people will leave, but this is our house. And that I have a thing for haunted houses at that point in my life. I was 11, 12. I already had a thing for haunted houses because we had lived in one. And
Yeah.
it was something that I found riveting. And it just rewired my little brain.
Yeah, I remember seeing this. It probably came out on home video in 2002, so I would have been 15
Yeah.
or 16. And I think it's the only horror film I ever watched at my grandmother's house because she did not abide such things. But like one of my cousins had it and said, "This is a really cool movie. We should watch it."
Hmm.
And at the time, I was still very much a horror movie newbie because it wasn't allowed in my house. But
Yeah, same.
I was like, well, if my cousins have it, I guess it's okay. So I'm gonna watch this. And it was just one of those like I don't think I fully understood the depth of it at the time, but looking at it now,
Hmm.
it's such a layered piece. It's so beautifully shot because it's all the other amazing thing about the environment around this house is that there is perpetual fog around the
Hmm.
house.
Yep.
And they and Grace just is like, well, we live on an
It's Jersey.
island.
It's foggy,
Yeah,
you
we live on
know?
Jersey. Like fog is just a thing that happens here, but it creates that wonderful diffuse pale light
Oh, it's
coming in
gorgeous.
through all the windows, and it then becomes a plot point later because that's where she finds her husband. She ventures out into the fog, and you learn
Hmm.
that the fog is this sort of veil between it's sort of a spirit world veil
Yeah.
kind of keeping her in this little pocket ghost universe. um I also want to just real quick before we let go back and talk more about this whole thing. You mentioned the family saying fuck this shit and moving out. I forgot how quickly that happens. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing because you have the big scene at the end where it's like you finally learn like, oh, this is a séance, and the
Hmm.
parents the parents of the new family, the living family, are sitting at the table with this medium, and the medium's like attendant because she's blind, so she has a helper. And the mother is like, okay, so the house is haunted. We have to leave. And the dad's like, come on, do we? And she's like, yeah, your son can't sleep because he's always talking about the little girl that's bothering him when he tries to sleep. So we're moving. And he goes, okay. And that's it. I love that. I love that they just are like, nope, okay, done.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, same though. I was
Yeah.
invited to a writer's retreat where the people were like, oh, Isabel, you'll love it. We're going to stay in a haunted house. I did not go.
So
No, thank you.
so we have to go back because this was something that came up in the email thread as we scheduled this interview. So
Yeah.
I have to ask you about the haunted house you grew up in.
Yes. Yes.
What years, what ages were you when you lived in this
So
house?
we moved into this house when I was about 5 years old. It's in the suburbs north of Chicago, and I we lived there until there was a year and a half or so where we weren't there because we were living in Mexico City and rented it out, and then we moved back. So I want to say from like 5 to 6, and then like ages 8, 9, 10-ish, 8, 9. So not a long time. My family moved a lot up until very recently, actually. I had never lived in one place for longer, one house or apartment for longer than 4 years.
Hmm.
So between the time I was born and when I went away to university, I think I counted up like eight, I lived in 8 or 9 houses. And so I have lots of thinky thoughts about houses and their energies because I've just sampled quite a few.
Hmm.
And this particular house was a red brick 1920s-ish house. No, actually, it was maybe close to 100 years old when we lived there in the 90s. So maybe 1920s, regardless. It had this creepy ass basement that was kind of half finished, um, that just had this sinking energy that wigged me and my sisters out. We would play down there, but one thing that would happen was when we misbehaved, and as a kid, I talked back a lot, and I've always been a little rebellious, so uh, that was me. We would have timeouts, And so we would be in the timeout corner for as many minutes as we were old. So if we were super bad, the timeout corner was at the bottom of the basement stairs. And
Mm.
so I would sit down there for 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, all alone in, not a lot of light, looking at this basement and just thinking that that something was watching me and that something knew I was there. And man, oh man, my older sister would bargain and beg her and sob her way out of these timeout corners. She once bartered away her favorite stuffed animal, like to be like, you can take my favorite stuffed animal, but don't make me do a timeout at the bottom of the stairs. I was not, I would not, I would not so demean myself. I would fine, send me to my punishment, father. I don't care. And so I'd sit down there and think about it. My aunt, my mom's sister, once would often stay with us to help look after us. And she woke up one morning to the sensation that somebody was bending over her, and she assumed it was my mom. And so she said, like, "Oh, I'm coming to wake up and help with the kids." And she opened her eyes, and there was a woman standing over her in a green dress, wearing an apron with her hair slicked back in a very tight bun, who vanished. And she told me this after the Hacienda came out. So I was like talking about this house for the first time as an adult. And my aunt was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely, totally haunted." And I was like, "Bro, why didn't you tell me that?" Because there were closets, there were, all sorts of just like when it comes to older houses, they settle, they creak, they grumble to themselves. They all sorts of noises are made by houses as
Yeah.
they age. And sometimes these are completely benign, and sometimes they freak you the fuck out. Like my closet, my bedroom, like, no. Oh my goodness, there was something in there. And there was just like, I say something, air quotes, but I was just really afraid of certain spaces in this house. Um, and it's so interesting, how when we dream of places where we've lived before, they you only really experience certain parts of, well, one thing I've experienced, rather, I should phrase this as, when I dream of places I've lived before, to me that symbolizes like, oh yeah, I've really moved on from that part of my life. I've started dreaming about that particular apartment or that particular house. Like, oh wow, I've come far. I dream about the houses I lived in as a kid quite a lot. There's one house I lived in when I was watching The Others. Like, I have nightmares in the room where I watched The Others. Um, Pretty frequently, actually. And there's like a long hallway that led to that bedroom. And when I have nightmares about anything supernatural, ghosts, spirits that want to get me, it always takes place in that bedroom. I don't know why. But whenever I dream about this particular house, I always dream of the basement. And it really affected me as, a 5-year-old sitting at the bottom of the basement stairs trying to wait out 5 minutes, which when you're 5 is interminable, sitting in the gloom, trying not to think about what was watching you. It was freaky.
It's so fun talking about this stuff because my family we so my grandparents when they passed they lived in a house that, like, my grandmother hated talking about ghosts. She hated the idea of ghosts. She was very Southern Baptist, devout, Jesus loving lady, and she did not like the idea that there was some sort of in between. She
Mm.
wanted the cut and dried. You die, you go to the good place or the other place, and that's it. And there's nothing. And it was very funny because she had this relationship to it where it wasn't that she didn't believe in ghosts. It was that she didn't want to talk about it because she didn't like the idea of ghosts. So she couldn't dismiss the whole concept. And what's very interesting about that is after she died, her house was the house that my great grandmother died in. My great grandmother convalesced at
Oh,
my grandmother's home and actually passed away. And I had to ask my dad about this because once the house was empty and my sisters and I were cleaning it out, my youngest sister who lives next door to that house, so she was there a lot, started telling us that she was seeing a woman in a red jacket. There was a woman in red who would sort of
what?
show up out of the corner of your eye and just kind of walk. Didn't really do anything. They would just sort of see glimpses occasionally. And I said, well, the only person that I know of who ever died on that land, on that property, is my great grandmother. So, we had to ask my dad, like, did she actually die there, or did like the ambulance come and she died
Yeah.
on the way to the hospital, at the hospital, something? And we asked, and it was like my dad was like, no, 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 she passed away in that room. I was home when it happened. I remember. And
Whoa.
the amazing twist at the end of that story is we kept saying red jacket, and I was like, it has to be her. Who else would it be? And when my grandmother was still alive, we had asked her about grandma, and she said, well, yeah, she had a red jacket that she liked to wear. I don't know what happened to it, and blah blah blah. So then my great grandparents' home is across the road. This is very rural Texas, so like everybody lived next to each other. It's across
Hmm.
the road, and that house is falling down. So we went to clean it out, get anything valuable out of it, opened a closet that probably hadn't been opened since about 1987, and found a woman's red jacket hanging in the closet. Yeah,
What did you do with it?
uh, I think it's not still there. It may have been donated. It may have been something else. I don't actually know. I'll have to ask my sister, but I remember her like going to that house and sending me a photo and saying, I just opened this closet. Look. And we were just like, oh my God,
I
confirmed.
love the best thing about the story to me is that you have this community because I think so often in um when it's- I totally believe in like haunting-ish things. Like,
Yeah.
could I put it in as many could I codify it in a way? Like I'm hesitant to because I think there's just a lot I don't want to know and don't want to be bothered by. But so much of what I've experienced living in places I've experienced alone or I'm afraid to share, for fear that talking about it will like, I don't know, give it strength or whatever. And every once in a while, my older sister and I will start to share things about places we've lived or places we go, families' houses where some weird energy hovers and coalesces. And there's just so much like it's such a euphoric feeling to share that and to think like I'm not crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you having that and like sharing like, oh my God, guys, the red jacket, it's real. Like that's so wild.
It's so fun. It was also a house where people ask me, I feel the same way as you about ghosts. I'm like,
Mhm.
I believe in something. I don't know that I'll ever have any kind of structured system of understanding what it is. And
I'm
people have
still writing
asked
my way
me,
through it. I'm like, I don't
yeah,
know what I believe. That's why I keep writing books about it.
exactly. People have asked me, like, have you ever seen a ghost? And I said, no, but I think I've heard one. And they, well, what do you mean?
Mm.
Well, that house, my grandmother's house, is a split level because it was originally built with a crawl space, and then they added stuff that's on a concrete slab around that.
Mm.
So there is still part of it with a crawl space, and if you walk heavily or run in a house with a crawl space, the house sort of quakes ever so
Yeah.
slightly. And my grandmother was constantly telling us when we were kids, especially if she had something baking in the oven, don't run because you'll make my cake fall or whatever it was that she had in the oven
Oh my God, that's so
because she
funny.
knew it would make the house shake and she was
Yeah.
worried it would shake the pan with the cake in it. So we have been outside that house while it was completely empty and heard the quaking of like someone walking through the house. One night I was sleeping there when I was a kid. I
My jaw
heard
dropped.
one night when I was sleeping there, I was a kid. We were sleeping on the living room floor in sleeping bags, and I was with my older cousin, and we were just laying there in the living room right next to the kitchen, and all of us, and we heard this like huge clatter of pots and pans. And I sat up and was like, "What was that?" And my cousin's like, "It was nothing. It was dishes in the dish drainer. Don't worry about it. Go back to
Mhm.
sleep." And I couldn't let it go. I was like, "No, we have to know what that was." But the problem was, to get to my grandparents to tell them something was going on, we had to walk past the kitchen. And I was scared to walk past the kitchen because I didn't know if something was in there. And so my cousin finally went in and like turned the light on and said, "Hey, there's nothing in here. It's fine." And I looked, there were no pots and pans anywhere, nothing disturbed. We just heard this like unbelievable clattering and I still can't explain it. So
That's so wild.
yeah, it's fun. It's my only like
That's so
real
wild.
it's my only like really sincere maybe a ghost experience in my life. But uh circling this back around to the others, I think that something that's so interesting about this movie and the way it handles you and I just talked about this idea of we're still trying to understand what these things are. We're still trying to. So
Mhm.
once you know the twist, once you know that Grace and her children are dead, they are ghosts, you come to understand that Mrs. Mills, who is the housekeeper slash nanny to the children, who's sort of the leader of this 3-person staff that Grace has hired, is sort of they're sort of psychopomps. They're like they're the
Mhm.
guide. They're like we're going to let them know that they're dead, but they're not ready yet. We have to break it to them gently that they're dead.
Mhm.
Um, and when you watch the movie back, there are all of these like wonderful clues. Like when they first enter the home, the sound design is weird. It makes this weird sort of ethereal echoey thing with their voices to kind of let you know like these are not entirely human voices. Maybe something weird is happening with the sound. Um, and then I love, because you mentioned that the staff not being there and her needing to hire new staff. What she actually says when she's introducing Mrs. Mills and showing her around is the staff, the we had a staff but they disappeared. And Mrs. Mills is like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yeah, just like a week ago, they just were gone. And we don't know why. And anyway, I need a new housekeeper. So let me just show you the rest of the house." And you're like, "What?
Yeah,
What?"
because like as a viewer, you're like, feels odd that she's just kind of glancing over that. Like, why did they leave? What? But you just kind of continue to be swept along with the story. But yeah, it's great.
And the way that they sort of slowly introduce the idea of like, "Hey, don't look through that photo album of dead people all the way because you'll see that we're in that photo album of dead people, and then you'll understand what's going on." Uh, but one thing that I found so interesting that I don't think I clocked in earlier viewings of this film is that the first half of the film is very loaded with talk of religion and faith and
Hmm.
superstition.
Hmm.
And Mrs. Mills and Grace even have a conversation about superstition, and they talk about ghosts, and Grace is like, "I just don't understand why people could believe things like that," because she is very like Jesus
Very
centered and
like Catholic.
makes
Yeah.
her kids read the Bible every day out loud and all of that. And Mrs. Mills says like, "Oh, well, I think you'll be surprised what people believe when they're really pushed." And it's the most like, "Oh, you're like preparing her for this moment." And we talked earlier about superstition and faith and belief systems.
Hmm.
And when you watch this movie knowing the twist, it becomes the story of a woman who has put in place a very elaborate, very structured belief system for herself and her children so that she will not have to face the truth of her situation, which is that she has been utterly abandoned by like post-war English society to be this widower with 2 kids having to just find a way through whatever is about to happen to her. And that is something like you don't have a novel set in post-war UK 1945 yet, but you definitely have that. There is that feeling running through, and it's definitely in the possession of Alba Diaz. This idea that like this is the structure of our world, And
Hmm.
if you break that structure, horrible things are going to happen. Do you
Hmm.
have you is the others something that you think of as this very like, oh, I had this in childhood and it was very important and rewired my brain? Is it just the thing that you think of in that past tense way, or is it something that you feel like you carry with you as you write?
Oh, I absolutely carry it with me. I think there's something in that film that I say rewired my brain, but my brain was also ready for it based on the experiences that it had had and continued to have as a kid in a very structured black and white, being raised in a very structured black and white belief system. And also somebody who lived in spaces where that taunted that very same structured belief system, um, or that challenged it through inexplicable vibes, if you will, of a haunted house. And I mean, it's something that I keep writing about. Like, I had forgotten about that film. I forgot about it for years. I saw it when I was 11. I didn't, if you were to ask me, like, oh, what were your favorite movies growing up? I would have said Lord of the Rings or
Hmm.
like The Princess Bride or The Devil Wears Prada. Like, it wasn't the first thing that came to mind. But then I wrote The Hacienda. It just sprang out of me during the pandemic. I'd written the first 20,000 words or so before, but then we went into lockdown and it just poured forth from me. I wrote it so fast. And I looked at what I had, and before this was The Hacienda was my first horror novel. I'd never really written horror before. I'd written like maybe one short story. Um, I'd written fantasy before, and then all of a sudden, boom, this gothic novel pops out of me, fully formed, with so much Catholic shit in it, which is something I swore I never wanted to deal with again in my life. And then, boom, there it was. One of the main characters is a priest, for God's sake. Like, come
Yeah.
on. Um, and it made me start to question, like, what is in my leaf mold? Truly, what and look, and then I started promoting the novel when it sold and was going to come out, and people would start asking me about the pieces that influenced this particular book, and that I now see influenced Vampires of El Norte, and especially The Possession of Alba Diaz. There's so much gothic in my bones. My favorite novels when I was a teenager were Wuthering Heights, Dracula, Beloved when I was 19 and in university. I read it when I was still really young. I can't reread it as a mother now. I was trying to
Hmm.
reread it 2 years ago, and it is so profoundly sad. But I think the others just slots right into that whole bibliography, if you were, of the Gothic that is about like how we deal with trauma and how we try to make sense of our world when it is such a sad place sometimes. So it is something that I continue to take with me. And I think that now that I'm in this new phase of life, like I was thinking to myself, like I've been promoting Alba Diaz, which is really fun, talking about it and talking to different people about my craft as a writer, and I won't shut the fuck up about motherhood. Like,
Mm.
Isabel, will you stop? And I was thinking about this occurred to me as I was, of course, like in the shower washing my hair, like reliving past conversations and thinking everything I could have said differently. Um, but I think, really in a huge part of who I am as a horror writer now is also somebody who is a mother, because the world is very scary now and very different. And I think that, yeah, the sort of gothic that I'm going to be writing in the future is going to be very informed by that. And now, like, thinking about the others in that light and rewatching it as a parent has been such, not only does it explain who I was as a young person, but I think it explains it, or it doesn't explain, but it is interesting to reflect upon who I am now as a parent while watching it. Like, to what extent would I go to protect my children? Um, And like the tragedy of, I mean, again, spoilers. Like if you're at this point in the podcast, like you've seen the movie. Um, the tragedy of the movie is that it was like the reason she and her children are dead was murder suicide. She smothered her children and killed herself. Like, and she's atoning for that by trying to protect them so obsessively. And thinks when she wakes up that she's had none of that happened. It's like another gift from God. It's another lease on life.
Mm-hmm.
We're just starting fresh. And isn't that just so sad? I don't know. I wandered off from the question, but
No, no,
here
no.
we are.
It is watching it as a parent. It is very, and once you understand what she is going through throughout the film, because she is so obsessive and demanding about all of these rules that she has put in place that are all for the benefit of her children. But they're really for the benefit of her. She just doesn't know it
Hmm.
because she has been
Absolutely.
trying so hard to uh to come to some sort of terms with what's going on and fit it into the religious and social and philosophical worldview that she has lived up to this point. Like there's a great conversation earlier in the film where she's talking to her kids and they ask about their father. Um, and she explains like war to them, and she says like, in war there are goodies and baddies, and dad was on the side of the goodies because
Hmm.
he fought for England and he fought against the Germans. And the kids ask, well, how do you know that they're goodies and baddies? How do you know which one is good and which one's bad? And she tries to explain it in like kid ways of just like, well,
Hmm.
Germans do bad things, so we fought them. And it very much feels like for her that like she is both the hero and the villain of this story,
Hmm.
and she's trying to
Absolutely.
rewrite it. It's so great.
Absolutely. It's absolutely. This is a movie that I think you could pick apart for ages, especially if you were to. It gives you so much more every time you rewatch it. You pick up on different themes and you see just how layered that particular character is. Yeah. I when I think I've only ever seen it twice because there was the time I watched it when I was 11, and I have a very visual memory, and so I can like replay scenes from it in my head,
Mhm.
and I can see like I don't know if I ever rewatched it because it scared me too much, frankly. Like I am first and foremost a mega weenie when it comes to horror movies. And so I felt like, oh my God, Matthew's gonna think I'm such a wuss when I tell him, this horror movie that shaped me was The Others, which isn't horror, like it's gothic. It's very, very gothic. And I think, and it's about ghosts. And I think ghosts as a genre element can span honestly different literary spaces,
Yeah,
if you will,
yeah.
for sure. So is this strictly a horror film? Well, the internet thinks so, so obviously it must be. Uh, yeah, I completely forgot where I was
it
going with that thought.
it's legitimately scary though. Like I,
It's
it's
frightening.
it's always fun for those of us who mainline horror movies forever to go back and look at these things and go like, is that as scary as I remember it? Because like I was a teenager when I watched this movie, and
Hmm.
this is a PG-13 movie. You're
Yeah,
not getting hit with a bunch of gore. We mentioned the murder suicide. You never see
you
that.
never see
you
it.
never you never see a person die in front of your eyes in this movie. It is all about these ghostly visions and apparitions
It's
and
all about what you
sounds.
can't see.
But that scene where she goes into the room with all of the furniture under drapes, all the furniture
Yes,
that's
and
been,
she's ripping off the drapes.
and
Oh,
then
honestly, I wrote a scene actually in an upcoming book that has not been announced that is a tribute to that very scene because it has been in my memory ever since.
well, and I just love the way that the way that the movie just sort of disrupts, like you said at the beginning, it disrupts her carefully structured little world, and it does it in and it's because it's Nicole Kidman. Like, you understand the urgency that she feels about maintaining these things. And one of the things that she tells the housekeepers is, you do not open a door in this house without closing it behind you. And that's
Mhm.
because she has to keep her kids contained and sealed off in darkened
From the
rooms,
light.
because
Mhm.
it so she can't have light bleeding in from a room where the windows are open into a room where the windows are closed. So it's, you always keep the doors closed. And she keeps a set of keys with her at all times, always locks the door behind her. It's very important. And in that scene where she's ripping all the drapes off the furniture because she believes there are intruders in her house,
Yeah.
and she's trying to find these people who are going to hurt her children. And she looks in a mirror, and she sees behind her that the door has swung open.
Yeah.
That is so great. It
Goosebumps.
is such a
Goosebumps just
it
racing over my arms.
it played when I saw it, 20 some odd years ago, and it played when I saw it last night. I felt it
It's
again.
so powerfully done. And I think this movie is a masterclass in the use of dread, suspense, tension, and a sense of the uncanny.
Hmm.
It does not take a big jump scare to scare your readers or viewers. It just takes a door opening.
Yeah.
And isn't that so honestly magical?
It's magical, and it's elegant, and I
Elegant. This movie is so elegantly
it
done.
really is. It really is. And it definitely, like, it feels like something that carries through your novels. Like, it's sometimes when we have these conversations with authors, it's very much a, like, well, this is what opened my eyes to the power of horror storytelling. And I
Hmm.
haven't necessarily written anything like it, but it's very important to me for these reasons. And then other times you talk to someone, and it's like, no, this is like, I am still processing how I feel about this story through
I
everything I
am.
write. And this
I
is
am.
one of those
The older
times.
I get, the more I change and the more I need to come back to it and rewrite what I am thinking and processing. Like, I think I have an idea for a future novel where the house is shrouded in mist, and gee, why could that be?
Yeah.
You know, it is one of those movies. I joke that it rewired my brain, but I genuinely think it might have.
Yeah.
Did it make me? Because I watched it before I read Wuthering Heights and before I got super into the Gothic. So maybe, yeah, I was ready for the Gothic before watching that movie. See aforementioned haunted house, see aforementioned, speculative reality. But was it my entree into the Gothic? Perhaps it was.
Before we let you go, we're coming to the end of our time here. I have to circle back and ask, because you mentioned being a medievalist.
Yes.
Is a medieval historical horror or fantasy or anything, is that an area that you would ever consider writing a book in? Because I am a nut for medieval European history, so I would love that.
Hell yes.
Awesome.
Hell yes. So my training is in Islamic history.
Okay.
My degree is in Near Eastern languages and civilizations, specifically Ottoman and Turkish studies. So I researched and taught about the medieval Middle East, particularly the Ottoman Empire and Iran. And I have a short story that's available to read online called A Land of Saints and Monsters that is basically my PhD dissertation plus vampires. It is about the story. My dissertation and the short story are about the story of King Danishmend, who is a warlord living in central Anatolia in the 1100s. It's kind of like a King Arthur and his knights kind of vibe, where it's him and his, I guess, air quotes, knights, his Ghazis, his warriors, fighting evil Byzantines and going out to conquer Anatolia in the name of Islam. And I thought he has this companion who is a convert from Christianity, who's a warrior woman. Her name is Ephromia in the original text. And I find her endlessly fascinating. And so I wrote a short story from her point of view, where there's some magic, some magic and some of the monstrous in medieval Anatolia in the 1100s. So I would think it could be expanded into a novel, and I think the number one person who is waiting for this is my PhD advisor. He would love it. He has been endlessly supportive and was because I was writing novels as I was writing my PhD dissertation. So I fessed up to it and he was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing. Keep doing it." And to be clear, he was the only person on my committee who would have been supportive, who not the only person on my committee, but one of the only people in my department who was like supportive of this endeavor. Yeah, I would love to do that. And so because I think that there are so many gorgeous ways that this could happen in novels in the future. I'm also working on a fantasy novel right now that I hope one day sells that absolutely has these elements. It's very medieval, and has a lot of horror elements in it. This is absolutely where I want to turn next. I have some special stuff coming up on the horizon where that are more in line with my current published novels, but in the future, you can absolutely expect that from me.
I'm looking forward to it. Uh, Isabel, this has been wonderful. Before we let you go, will you let people know where they can find you online? And I know you're
LOL.
this LOL. The Possession of Alba Diaz is out August 19th. This will go up on August 20th. So if you have any events coming up in that immediate period, if you want to let us know about those.
So after August 20th, let's see, I will be at the Aspen Book Festival in Aspen, Colorado in September. I will be at the South Texas Book Festival in McAllen, Texas in October. And I think that might be it. Oh, no, I am going to be the MC for Olivia Blake for her horror debut Girl Dinner at Third Place Books here in Seattle at the Lake Forest Parks location on October 28th. So I have some fun stuff coming up. Yeah, and the place where you can find me is between the pages of my books. But the real answer is isabelcañas.com. You can find the links to my newsletter there. That is where you will get all of the latest and greatest updates from me. Not super frequently, but frequently enough. And the one place my publisher wishes I was more is Instagram. So I try to be there on at Isabel Cañas _.
All right. Our guest has been Isabel Cañas. The book is The Possession of Alba Diaz. Go get it. Isabel, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
This was a fantastic conversation. I loved the whole premise of it. When my publicist reached out, was like, "Hey, you want to talk about something that, broke your brain as a kid and influences the horror you write now?" I was like, "Say less. Say less." So thank you so much for a great time.
Thanks so much to Isabel Cañas for being on the show. The Possession of Alba Diaz is available everywhere books are sold right now. I highly recommend going and picking it up. You will be able to find my review over at Paste sometime in the next few days. I'm not exactly sure when it's going up, but it's there. Spoilers, loved it. Great book. Isabel is doing historical horror like no one else right now, and I can't wait to read whatever she puts out next. Please go pick up that book, follow her on socials, and please follow us on socials. If you want to keep track of everything we've got going on, the best way to do that is to go and find us on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social. That is where you will find new episodes whenever they come out on Wednesdays, announcements of new guests, giveaways. We just did a big giveaway for the massive The Stand anthology, The End of the World as We Know It. We're going to have more giveaways coming in the near future, and a bunch of other stuff, including some stuff I'm not ready to talk about yet. You'll probably find out about it first by going to our Blue Sky page. So head over there if you haven't followed us yet. We are also on Facebook. We're The Scares That Shaped Us over there. We are also on YouTube. We are The Scares That Shaped Us on YouTube. If that is how you prefer to listen to your podcasts, head over there, like and subscribe. And please, if you like the show, tell your friends about us. Leave us a 5-star review on the podcasting app of your choice. That helps us to grow our audience by getting featured in various places. And we really want to grow our audience because we have some very cool stuff coming up in the next couple of months, starting with our guest for next week. We are turning 1 on August 28th. It'll be the 1-year birthday of my precious little baby podcast. And we're going to celebrate on Wednesday, August 27th, with the return of the original The Scares That Shaped Us guest. Probably the final The Scares That Shaped Us guest one day. Clay McLeod Chapman will be here. We're going to talk about Clay's new short story collection, Acquired Taste, and we're going to talk about Stephen King's legendary short fiction collection, Skeleton Crew. It's a great conversation about King's influence, about short stories in general, and about Clay's amazing work on this new collection, which is just all bangers. It's no skips, all bangers, the whole thing. It's a blast to read. So that will drop again next week, August 27th at noon Central. And then on August 28th, we will have our first birthday, and we may be announcing some cool new stuff. You'll have to follow us on Blue Sky to find out. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.